Hello, this is Laura Walsh, and you're watching Tea Time. Tonight we have a really exciting topic with our guest, Carolee Adams. Hello, Carolee.
Hello, Laura. Nice to be here with you tonight.
Thank you. It's great to see you. And Carolee is president of Eagle Forum, New Jersey, and is an expert on Common Core. And so I'd like to start off. This is a sort of a tutorial. It's a big project. It's a big topic. It's very important to families throughout New Jersey and around the country. So what is Common Core?
The official name for Common Core is the Common Core State Standards Initiative, also affiliated with PARC in the state of New Jersey. PARC represents the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness for College and Careers. And so with the standards, and then is Common Core, and with the testing, it's PARC. And just right away, I would just maybe say that even the title itself, Common Core State Standards Initiative, is intellectually dishonest because of the fact that they were not really initiated by the states. This is a tops-down, federally driven program and not initiated by the states. In fact, the standards were adopted, or I should say adopted by New Jersey before the standards were even written.
Okay, so thank you for that explanation. I know there's a lot here. So essentially Common Core is curriculum, right? Implemented in our schools?
Many people, K through 12, people will disagree and say it's not curriculum, but if you're going to test these standards, it becomes the curriculum.
Right, so it's lesson plans and it's assignments and et cetera. And it's a different way of teaching, correct?
Well, I mean, there are many who believe this is teaching to the test and voluminous reporting, and there's a great deal of concern about that from many different forums, from teachers, from parents, and from taxpayers who have to fund it as well.
Okay, so for instance, if we look at math, there's some great examples we're going to post on our website that Carolee has provided us with, and it'll be NewJerseyTeaPartyCoalition.org. But there was an illustration of the child being asked to complete 3 times 5 is 15, right? And it was a word problem. But actually, by the end of the exercise, the child got so confused and said, "Oh, it's 14. 3 times 5 is 14." And then the answer was, "Oh, that's correct because you think it's correct."
Well,
is that correct?
There are many added steps to what we were accustomed to as being simple. In fact, I was in Home Goods the other day and standing in line, and I had my button on, and there were 2 different parents who talked about how they can't help their children with their math homework. And I tried to find out if this was helpful to children in some ways, developing concepts. However, if you have a child who is very adept at math, very frustrating for a child. They know the answer, they could figure it out quickly. They have to explain how they got to the answer. They could get the wrong answer, but if they explain it correctly, then they're marked. That it was okay. But I've seen steps where they're like 15 steps, which we used to be able to accomplish in 1 step. So, but the essay format is and it's also very hard for children who have special needs, because not only do they have to determine an answer, but they have to explain the answer, and a lot of this is done by computer. Extraordinarily frustrating, and it doesn't seem to be helpful, and we have not found any good reasons for it.
Okay, great. And you've researched this thoroughly, and I know you've been, working with the legislators and parents and the governor's office and in New Jersey for quite a while, right?
Well, we've been looking at Eagle Forum has opposed national standards since the 1990s. There's been this drive to push it through, one size fits less. And it doesn't. I mean, children are not cookie cutter kids. They're all developmentally different. And so they're trying to fit them into this mold so that they can compare them across the nation. And in fact, another misnomer is that these standards are internationally benchmarked and we're going to be globally competitive. And yet when you look at the United States of America, we have done very well. I mean, children come here to be educated. We don't go someplace else. And we compare, they're comparing standards or results to China. Well, they don't test everybody. They test their elites, or Finland, which is a very homogeneous population. I mean, not like the United States of America, very diverse, very multicultural, and we test all of our children.
Yes.
So that still, even with that, considering a professor by the name of Christopher Tinkin has done many slides and has a website, and he points out that, you know, as an example, I have one of his slides, the Nobel laureates in sciences, where the United States has 305, and compared to the next 8, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Switzerland, they do not even equate to the Nobel laureates in sciences. So it's another intellectually dishonest statement to say that we're going to be globally competitive and internationally benchmarked. We already do quite well in the United States.
Great. So those are so we have this national. So first of all, school choice used to be local, right? Curriculum was local, right? And it was all very based on the community needs and the desires of the parents, and that's gone. Correct.
I mean, everybody that I talk to, parents and educators alike, and as well as legislators, believe in local control. And a man by the name of Luke Gerstner, who was the former CEO of IBM, and who sponsored the National Governors Summit on Education at the IBM training facilities, wrote an article in the Wall Street Journal in 2008, and the subtitle of it was "Let's Abolish All Local School Districts."
See, that's really what it's about, right? Big goal, right?
Well, it's control. It's federal control. And when we look at, this is about education. We've had a big debacle about healthcare. Once again, it's controlled at the federal level, and that hasn't worked out too well, has it? And so with the children, we're experimenting with the children. Bill Gates, who's tremendously interested in Common Core and Park and has invested a lot of his own money into it, and I don't believe for altruistic reasons either, has said, well, we won't know if this experiment is going to work for another decade or not. So we're using our children as guinea pigs.
Exactly, to your point. And in researching for the story, what I learned is that there really wasn't even the testing, all the curriculum that's been developed hasn't really been thoroughly vetted. And you're right, it's an experimentation.
It's untested, untried, and Diane,
these people weren't even teachers, right, who created it?
Correct, that's right, and they were not. And regarding the being untested, untried, Diane Ravitch, who is a former Assistant Secretary of Education under both a Democrat and a Republican president, stated something that she used to be for nationalized standards, but with this, because it was untested, untried, and now she's one of its fiercest opponents. And regarding the fact that on the Common Core Validation Committee, there were only 2 academics, Dr. Sandra Stotsky and Dr. James Milgram, both refused to sign off on the validation committee. Stotsky has her PhD from Harvard. She wrote the finest standards for the state of Massachusetts, English language arts, and Milgram was a professor emeritus from Stanford, a NASA scientist, and he refused to sign off on the math standards because they were weak. STEM education, as an example, he feels that it will not produce, children will not be educated in STEM education, and a whole list of things regarding English language arts and math that both of them opposed, refused to sign off.
Exactly, and STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math.
Correct.
Yes, and which is very important skill set for the future,
And even Milgram had said in one of his articles, and I mean, he's written many, many white papers about them, and I have one right here, Lowering the Bar, How Common Core Math Fails to Prepare High School Students for STEM. And that's from the Pioneer Institute. And the reason is that they're pushing back algebra 1 year. So when you push back algebra 1 year from 8th grade to 9th grade, algebra 1, then you're pushing back all your higher level math courses as well. Discrete math, calculus, pre-cal, trigonometry. And those are courses that prepare students to go into engineering college courses. So they will have to take remedial courses. And Milgram came up with this astounding couple of papers where he said, number one is that America would fall back in its technology. Even Bill Gates has moved his software development to China. And then when you're pushing it back like that, he says, well, where are we going to get our future engineers? And the astounding and amazing, shocking common line was, we're just going to have to go outside of the country to get our engineers.
Which is what's happening now, correct? I mean, the technology workers, they're getting those visas to bring in technology workers from around the world, from India and Pakistan and China, who of course are not paid the 6 figures that Americans in many cases.
Well, but in addition
so it
to
lowers
that,
wages.
you have your colleges now that larger and larger numbers of their students are coming from foreign countries, and of course they're coming without need for a lot of scholarships. So they, so colleges are very happy to get those foreign students into those engineering courses and science courses. So there's a great deal to be considered about that. Parents should revolt against this. They really must.
I think, and then I think that's what really. So we're looking at just kind of some, and then we'll move forward. Is it's a national curriculum. It hasn't been vetted. New Jersey accepted it into the system really without any parental or local school district, right? There was no feedback or input at all, right?
The architects of this really come from two non-governmental organizations. It sounds like it's government when I say the National Governors Association, but that's a trade association.
That's right.
We don't. And they also got and they also get a lot of Gates funding. And then you also have the Council of Chief State School Officers, and so they're the ones who have basically adopted this and forced it down the throats of local school districts.
Good to know.
And in New Jersey, we received, I think it was $38 million, and the estimates from groups like Pioneer Institute going back in 2012, and I know that the figures have escalated since then, is that New Jersey would need at least $575 million. So where are we going to get the rest of the monies from?
So it's $38 million we took, right? And in order to implement, we need $575 million.
At least.
And the state is broke, Carolee.
That's right.
I mean, how are we going to?
I mean, from the towns that I have investigated, they are looking for, each district is a minimum of $500,000 extra to implement Common Core, the technology, the professional development, the infrastructure, and up to $750,000. And at a hearing in Trenton, I heard somebody from Gloucester say something like $5 million. So, I mean, it's a huge amount of money, and for what? Technology is important. I mean, going back to Gates, he's got an evergreen source of funding coming in for his products and the technological industry as a whole. And big business, they just want to have worker bees and to fit into whatever it's about training versus education.
Exactly. That's a good point, because my sister's a teacher, and she graduated from Harvard with her degree in history, and then she went on and she earned her master's in teaching. And so she's in Massachusetts, and she has Common Core. She's a 7th grade teacher, and she said there were in the English curriculum, there was a essay where the child was walking past a cemetery and saw a little boy who lived in the cemetery. And so the question was, do you make friends with the little boy who lives in the cemetery? I mean, it was really like deconstructing family. It was deconstructing community. It was deconstructing what a family is. And it was frightening. A child in the 7th grade, a cemetery is not a place that they really would hang out or an environment that they would welcome to be in, right? So it's just really peculiar content.
Whoever controls the standards has the ability to control it. I mean, you teach, whatever you're teaching the 7th generation, or the classroom of today are the future leaders of our country, so that there is a great deal of concern as to what is in this, what are in these standards, how are they going to change them, why don't we have the opportunity to have any input into them, and that's what we were trying to do in New Jersey.
Right, I'd like to hear more about that. So the effort, they come in, they push this curriculum on school districts across the state. There's pushback.
There has been. I mean, and it's growing. I mean, the front page of the Star Ledger just a weekend
September
ago
7th.
About on Common Core, there's no common ground.
Exactly.
And what we're finding is the nice part about it is we have a very diverse coalition. It's not just conservatives. It's not just liberals. We have teachers. We have parents. We have school boards who are all fighting back about this.
Great.
And that's why we put together a piece of legislation, and the New Jersey State Assembly, a very comprehensive form of legislation, it was A3081, covered all parts of Common Core, to determine the costs, compare the standards of today versus prior standards, looking into privacy, which we could talk about at great length, and so much more. And it passed the New Jersey State Assembly 72-4, which is
huge, right?
I mean, the Democrats and Republicans alike, and we were so excited.
Right.
And it went to the New Jersey State Senate, but there we ran into a very big impediment, and that was Governor Christie. Governor Christie saw that he was losing control over this Common Core in Park, and he convinced Senator Sweeney, Democrat, to pull that legislation from his from the voting session, not just once but 3 times, so that and even the disrespect that was shown and shock to all of us was that even the prime sponsors of the bill, Senator Van Drew and Senator Gordon, from Democrats from southern and northern Jersey, neither of them knew that the bill was going to be pulled.
Wow.
And what Christie has done now is he's going to put together his own executive commission. We have not heard who's on that commission yet, and they will decide. They were going to investigate look into only the assessments. So we still won't know the cost. We still won't have a comparison of the standards, and we still won't have an explanation as to how student privacy is going to be adversely affected or not. The developmental aspects of all of this is another thing too. So the governor is controlling this completely, and it's wrong. And now the Department of Education is coming out with their own dog and pony show to try and convince everybody throughout the state how good this all is. This is what they should have done before the standards were even adopted. Why are they coming out now? Because all of a sudden they're seeing the parents are revolting. So,
well, you know, property taxes, school tax is the largest component of property tax, right? So if the program actually costs, you know, $500 million and we only have $38 million.
Well, I saw
who's funding? That's coming out of the taxpayer's pocket, I would think, right?
My town that I live in, our town fathers did a wonderful job at keeping our taxes flat, so much so they even went down. I think there's only 1 of 2 in the state that did that. And all of a sudden I get a call from somebody and said, our taxes are going up because of the school budget. They're going up per household anywhere from $200 to $500 per household. So that has to relate in large part to Common Core and Park. And the technological aspect of it, and that will be continuous because
you have to replace these computers, right? And the printers.
My children gave me a little iPod 5 years ago, and I had misplaced it and found it, and it didn't work. And my son says, "You need a battery." So I walked. Eventually, what the bottom line was that the people at Apple said, "Oh, I'm sorry that this is vintage. We don't even have the parts to repair it anymore." So it's going to be a continuous, like I said, an evergreen source of need for new technology.
So when you think about this, I mean, let's just put our Mad Hatter caps on. So you have Bill Gates and his foundation that introduced these national standards that are adopted by the Republican Governors Association, which is a fundraising vehicle, really, right? And so you have those folks, and now where there's technology. So the technology, obviously, there's a conflict here with the Gates Foundation, right, and the technology that is needed, right? So that's it. And then there's also, with regards to testing, isn't it Pearson and a number of the large educational...
Pearson Education is a worldwide developer of publisher of textbooks and curriculum.
And they're here in New Jersey, too. I think they moved...
Their North American headquarters, I think, is right here in New Jersey. They moved from Upper Saddle River to Secaucus area. And we gave them an economic development grant to move as well, too, so that they are also largely behind this. But you have others involved. I mean, you have GE as an example. And the dreadful thing is I have in my possession a letter that was written by GE to Governor Corbett of Pennsylvania, a threatening letter saying, if you don't implement Common Core, we're not going to hire any of your graduates.
Are you kidding?
Truth, absolute truth. It was written about. I mean, that type of strong arming is to be rejected, and that's why you have both liberals and conservatives involved in it. I mean, I support capitalism. I don't like crony capitalism.
Well, I was just going to say that's what we have here is crony capitalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And to use our children for their own personal profit and bottom line is wrong, and it's not going to succeed. It will not succeed. I mean, we had an effort going back in the 90s, kind of an ancestor. It was an ancestor of Common Core. Same people involved, a lot of the same players, and they were going to take the children out of school 1 day per week to put them into jobs, train them. And we even had children in Atlantic City who were being taught to put lemon wedges on glasses and dip strawberries in chocolate, so that because the casinos were the big employer. Well, look what happened to the casinos of late. So we have to give children a very broad-based, and also an intellectually in-depth education, so they can apply their education to any number of jobs that they choose to in the future. And I do think that we can and should continue to do that. And I like to see more parents involved. I think parents are finally opening their books, looking at it, seeing what's happening with their child's education, and saying, not with my child, you don't.
Exactly. And I think we have an event coming up October 2nd, and this program should air October 1st. So hopefully the next day you can go to in Ridgewood.
It's a great event, and this is once again where I think there's save the date, learn more about the core and its impact on K-12 education. Thursday, October 2nd, 7 p.m., Ridgewood Public Library. And the nice part about it is We believe in what we're doing so much that we're making it bipartisan. We're bringing in the state president of the State Board of Education, who has said to me, "Send me all that you have." He wants to. This was also part of our legislation that we would have public hearings across the state. So that was ripped away from us, and so this president said, "I want to hold town hall meetings so that we can hear from you." We have Sandra Stotsky coming. We have a member of the State Board of Education. We have Dr. Joan Voss, who's a county freeholder in Bergen County, but she's also got a PhD and also co-authored a wonderful resolution, Bergen County Board of Chosen Freeholders. So, and Dr. Christopher Tinkin's coming. And just today we learned that we're also going to have the Assistant Commissioner of Education, Barry Ehrlichson, come. Initially, she had refused our invitation, and we put some pressure on it all. Commissioner Hesby refused it, but now she's come back.
Terrific. So that's October 2nd in Ridgewood at the library?
7 p.m.
7
and
p.m.
it's free.
Okay.
It's free.
Awesome. And people should just come listen, learn, right?
Absolutely. And question and answer will follow. But this is just to show that we're not doing as the Department of Education is doing, where they're having their dog and pony show and only their speakers are allowed to speak. We're having both sides of the issue speak, pro and con, and that I think shows that the intellectual dishonesty on their part and the intellectual honesty on our part to
because
say,
they're going to frame their presentation in the best possible light, and they're probably not going to allow people to speak and ask questions.
I've seen the dog and pony show. I saw it when I went down to a New Jersey State Board of Education committee hearing last week, and David Hesby was a very, very nice man. Commissioner of Education, also under Governor Whitman, when School to Work was defeated and set aside. But he started out the presentation by saying that, the thing that parents always ask me about the education is, what about, is this child going to get me a job? Well, once again, here we're thinking about career readiness, and it's important, but that's not the full, liberal education.
Skills,
right? And the second thing he said is that this was voluntarily adopted in 2010. Well, it came with strings. It came with $38 million. We had, in order to get the $38 million, and I will excuse Governor Christie and the other governors for doing this because it was at a downturn in our economy, a very deep part of our recession. So it wasn't voluntarily adopted. There was a carrot and stick.
Right.
I mean, and it was in order for us to get a waiver from No Child Left Behind, was out of Race to the Top funding. So this very carefully listened to what they have to say. It's not, and they had a panel. They had a panel as part of this presentation at the State Board of Ed meeting, and I heard them talk about remedial education, and 33 to 50% of our children need remedial education. Well, that may be true, and that's what our concern is, and much of our concern is that we have very successful schools in New Jersey, and where our children do not need remedial education. So why do we have to be dumbed down to those children who are? And there was a very interesting article coming out last week from some economic journal, and it pointed out where the problem today with education is really a dysfunctional home. I mean, and so if you're not going to have a home life that's going to, or parents that are missing in action, and they're not going to help their children be motivated to learn, well this is not going to correct it.
Right, exactly.
I mean, Dr. Milgram has even written about, or someone else has even written about the fact that children will be dropping out of school because of the frustrations that they're involved with. So every argument that they seem to have about supporting Common Core and Park and remedial education, it seems to fall flat on its face with the response from academics. I mean, part of English language arts is where they're going to reduce the composition of English language arts to be primarily instructional, writing restaurant menus or resumes, and taking out classical literature as a result. And I read an article from the journal Science, and it was published, I believe, in the New York Times, certainly no conservative publications, and it pointed out where, I think the title of it was Try a Little Chekhov, because the classical literature of the past has this great opportunity for children to read, to learn about empathy and compassion and social skills and everything. So if you're taking that away, writing a restaurant menu is not going to help them to interact with one another.
Exactly, and it's also taking away the commonality. I mean, everyone's read Catcher in the Rye. We've read the classics, right? And it's something we can talk about across a broad spectrum of people, right?
That's true.
And make references.
And E.D. Hirsch, who came out with that, at first he was for this Common Core, talking about a common set of, and now he said, please, I don't want to be known to be the author of this. I mean, so once again, people who had been on board for it, like Ravitch, like Hirsch, are backing away from it. And even Gates himself has put a moratorium, I assume, on giving any more funding for it for 2 more years, I guess, until the states
Did they get their ducks in a row?
Yeah, right? Yeah, because they want that money. They want that money. There's no doubt about it. Yeah,
exactly. So, you know, I'm looking at that now. There's another key part of this that is really creepy, and that is the outside of the testing, outside of the wacky curriculum that sort of deconstructs the family and what children know and how they learn. There's also this intrusive component, right, with questionnaires.
Well, you know, what you have is
data mining.
Yeah, the personalized student data mining, and there's a federal law called FERPA, about Federal Educational Rights and Privacy Act, and everybody said, oh well, we're not going to sell any of your child's information because we have the FERPA guidelines. Well, FERPA was watered down in the Obama administration, so that when these children take these assessments, and that's part of the memorandum of understanding that they signed when they got the money, is that that the information that is obtained through the testing, through the assessments, would be shared with the federal government, and/or it could be sold to private vendors for marketing purposes. And it's a longitudinal study, so that means cradle to grave.
Right. So they're tracking our children from K through, you know, 16 through college, right?
Oh,
I imagine,
yes,
and beyond.
Indeed. And
right?
I mean, from what I understand, there's something like 400 data points that they can use. So we have fought back on student surveys here in New Jersey. We have a bill in the state of New Jersey about without prior written informed parental consent, you can't ask for these student surveys. However, every 2 years I have to trek down to Trenton to make sure that they don't water down that, and it's also just district oriented. So there's always a threat to that happening, and I would say the privacy and the intrusion of the student privacy, the questions that can be asked, as I said, are...
Well, they're asking about gun ownership. They're asking about what did your parents say about, you know, a certain topic and describing certain people. I mean,
your political affiliations, have you wanted to commit suicide? I mean, they can ask anything, and even without asking specific questions, they can figure out who you are and what you are by the answers that you give.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it doesn't belong in a classroom.
No, it's totally inappropriate.
Right, absolutely. And a lot of parents are very upset about that. And you know, let's face it, students fool around when they answer too, so they're really giving a...
That's a good point.
And the parents are beginning now to rebel to the point where they're refusing for their child to take the assessments,
which is a very good sign, I think.
Yeah, well, it's like a
we need more rebellion.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and unfortunately, though, I mean, we don't have a law in New Jersey that defines exactly how we go about it. So parents are learning. We have seminars about that right now to teach the parent how to do this in a professionally and civilly obedient way. And but what it boils down to is that the parents have recognized those assessments have nothing to do with their child's placement, has nothing to do with their achievement. But what it has to do, it's a hammer on the head of the teachers.
Exactly.
And I think it's absolutely wrong to hold a teacher accountable for something that's untested and untried and voluminous.
That's a great, and this time flew by so fast. We're closing up, but this was a great notion to end on. For more information, look at our website, njtpartycoalition.org. We'll have links next to the segment. Thank you so much, Carolee, for sharing this wonderful information.
Okay, thank you, Laura.
Thank you so much. Come back.
Okay,
and we'll pick up where we left off.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.